Welcome to the TAE Program Introduction Webinar Series. This webinar is Introduction to Training and Workplace Health and Safety. And in this webinar, the learning outcomes are the student U will explain duty of care, risk management process, hazard identification, risk assessment, hierarchy of control, workplace health and safety reporting. My name's Murray Humphrey and I'm a train assessor with Inspire Education, and I'm going to take you through the information contained within this webinar. This is just a brief introduction to workplace health and safety based on your either current or your existing experience within the workplace. You will find that the information is quite similar, and we try to give it reference to the training environment. If you're new to workplace health and safety, this will give you a brief overview on the requirements for you as a trainer and assessor working within the professional practice in the vet sector, as well as giving you some basic workplace health and safety information that would be important to you across any industry. If you see here, we've got a graphic there that shows a caption, "Is that safe?" Oh sure, it would take a few hydraulic failures before it comes down. It's very important in relation to your role as a trainer assessor to be aware of the health of the workplace health and safety considerations that you have for your participants in a training situation, whether it be in a simulated environment or in the workplace, as well as it is if you're an assessor assessing a candidate. That you are aware of the risks and hazards within your business. And as you can see there, it is quite a slapstick view of safety, and you need to be aware of all those issues and address them as they appear. So the first thing you need to know in relation to the workplace health and safety is, as a trainer and assessor, you have a duty of care. And in relation to that duty of care, there are a number of things that you need to be aware of under workplace health and safety. And that is the supervision, instruction and training that you provide to your participants and your candidates. Secondly, you need to create a safe environment for your training participants, whether it be in the workplace or a simulated environment where you've taken them away from the workplace and you're in a training room environment. It also goes for where you're doing group delivery and one-on-one, and we'll talk about those considerations later in the webinar. You need to make sure that you have documented and safe work systems, that the environment that you're working in has systems that promote safety, workplace health and safety for your trainees and also your candidates. In the training requirements in relation to your role as a trainer and assessor, you need to make sure that the training resources that you use are also, and equipment are safe, and there are no hazards, and that they, as I said, there's no danger in somebody using them. Again, very important communication about the safety requirements. When you're conducting training, you need to make sure that you cover off all the details in relation to the training in your introduction and follow those through as the training progresses. And again, we'll be talking about that towards the end of this webinar. And finally, you need to make sure that you provide information about any hazards, whether it be you communicate those verbally or you have written information sheets that provide details to your participants regarding the materials or that they'll be using during the training in the workplace or in your simulated environment. As I said to you, it's very important that you can seriously consider the duty of care that you take on board as a trainer and assessor in conducting professional practice in the vet sector. You need to make sure that you have the physical well-being as well as the mental well-being of your trainees or your participants in training and your candidates during assessment. In relation to workplace health and safety, we have to consider risk management and what it is. And it's got there, risk management is the process of finding and fixing health and safety problems. And this is a definition used by WorkCover in New South Wales. And it's very much the process that you use in any industry within the Australian workforce, as well as the same one that we would use in relation to a training environment with any organisation that you will be working with. I want to highlight for you, risk management will vary from location to location, or should I say from workplace to workplace, and you need to be aware of those procedures in relation to each environment that you're moving into, so that you know for your own safety, and more importantly for you as a trainer assessor, aware of those risk management practices that you'll be working with and needing to share with your participants in training or your candidates that you may be assessing in the workplace. A risk management process has a number of steps. And the first step we need to talk about with the risk management process in general terms is, first of all, you need to be able to identify a hazard. A hazard is something that will can cause an incident or injury to yourself or other participants in your training or candidates in assessment. As you can see there, and this is just a slide that says what is a hazard. And if you have a look at each of those examples there, you'll find that they can vary from faulty equipment to trip hazards to a poorly set up workplace that is using substandard equipment to prepare and do work in the workplace. More so in relation to an office situation or a training environment, as you can see, you can see there are a number of hazards in relation to you need to have an ergonomic workstation or training area, as well as clear it from clutter. Making sure that you have effective lighting and good ventilation are all important. But these are examples of hazards. I want to highlight they can be something that can occur in the short term or happen immediately, or they're things. Hazard can be something that occurs over a long period of time. For example, sitting in a bad ergonomic position would be something that would be a long-term hazard if there isn't a risk assessment done on it and managed. So these are some examples of what a hazard is in the workplace. Moving on, we've just looked at some images of hazards, but there are different type of hazards that you need to be aware of in the workplace. And some of those hazards first of all, we have physical hazards. These can cause tripping, falls, cuts, sprains, and bruising. They can be ergonomic, causing strain, injuries, and illness. And third one, they can be psychological. We need to be aware of the physical hazards, but we also need to be aware of the hazards that can cause mental health issues. And again, as a trainer or assessor, you need to be aware of some of the training practices that you use may affect the physical and mental health of your participants. Moving on, there are hazardous substances caused by chemicals, materials, or other substances that you may be using in your training or being used when you train in the workplace. They can be biological, caused by contamination or disease, and you need to be aware of the environment that you're training in so that you minimize contamination or the cause of spreading of illness. They can be radiation, caused by light, heat, or an energy source. Again, very important to make sure that the training, whether it be in a simulated environment in a training room or the workplace, that you have it's well lit and there is effective ventilation to make the environment safe. And the final one we have in relation to workplace health and safety is electrical, causing electrocution or electrical damage, which can cause either injury or death to a person. So again, being aware of all the types of hazards is very important in the risk management process. Moving on, as I said, we've covered off in a risk management process, in general terms in a workplace, you need to identify what the hazard is. The second one is you need to do a risk assessment on what may be the cause and effect of the hazard causing injury or an incident. In relation to that, we look at two factors in relation to any risk assessment. We look at the probability of it happening, whether it be high to low, or whether and the impact of the injury to a person. Would it be low in that it may just be a minor cut, or is it high in that it could even bring death? And these are the two factors that you need to consider when doing a risk assessment or assessing the risk in the workplace of that hazard, and making effective documentation of that assessing that risk. The next thing you need to do then is, once you've identified the hazard, once you've done assessed the risk based on those two factors of probability and the impact or cause it may have, been high to low for both of those factors, we then need to be able to control the risk. What can we do to help manage that risk occurring, or at least managing the impact of it having an effect on an incident or an injury in the workplace? And in relation to those factors, there is a control diagram which we call the hierarchy of control. And as you can see there, it goes from from top to bottom, and that's the way you use the control. The best way to manage a hazard or control the risk is by eliminating it completely from the workplace, whether it be your training in the workplace or a simulated environment. The second stage of the hierarchy of control in controlling the risk is substitute it with something else in the workplace so that it makes it safer. Third hierarchy control is, can you isolate it so that there is no cause for it to be taking it out of the it still may be there, but is there a way that we can isolate it from occurring? Secondly, can we engineer a change in relation to making the hazard and the risk less impact based on probability and control? And finally, the final two are administrative controls. And when we talk about administrative controls, we're talking about using signs, for example, to highlight an area of a risk within the workplace which is unavoidable. It is a part of the role, and yet and to manage it, we can put signs there to help that. And in some cases, the risk is a part of the job in the workplace, and the way that we do that is use personal protective equipment, and that may be the use of a helmet, it may be the use of gloves and breathing equipment, depending on what the risk is and in whatever workplace you're working. So again, in relation to the steps in relation to risk management, we need to be able to process is identify the hazard, assess the risk, control the risks using through the hierarchy controls, and what control would be best to manage that risk. And then ongoing, we have the process of monitoring those controls, making sure that the action plans that we put in place to control the risks are followed up, and we're making sure that they remain in place and are the best effective way to control that risk. And throughout the process, there is always the issue of being able to consult with the various people within an organization and outside the organization. And they would be, of course, your depending on the size of your organization, it would be your supervisor, your other workers, as well as your safety officer or your safety committee. And very important is your own self-responsibility in relation to the risk management process, making sure that you follow instructions during any consultation in the case of managing risk, and also reporting hazards that you feel need to be addressed in the workplace. So these are all components of workplace health and safety you need to be aware of in relation to any workplace across any industry in the Australian business or manufacturing or any industry that may occur. In relation to reporting of workplace health and safety, it's very important to be aware of when training in relation to reporting, when training, follow your organisation's workplace health and safety policy and procedures for the recording and documentation when you're reporting hazards, completing risk assessments or assessing the risk, reporting and recording an incident and or injury, and finally the risk management action plans and follow-up. You need to make sure that into a workplace that you're going into, and or if you're working, that you're at least aware of what the evacuation procedures are for that training policy of that workplace health and safety, to make your trainees aware of that. Moving on in relation to training and workplace health and safety, when training, you need to consider workplace health and safety prior to commencement of any training. And it's very important to be aware of, prior to the start of the training, we need to communicate with our participants where the date of the training, the location of the training, and what they're required to bring. If there are any specific safety requirements where they may need to bring PPE, personal protective equipment, you need to advise them of that, so that they are prepared when they come on site to conduct either the training in the workplace or in a simulated environment, that they have the information to prepare themselves for that training. Or likewise, you make sure you have the equipment to give them prior to the commencement of training. Also a part of your organisation as a trainer assessment in professional practice in the vet sector is to make sure that you have done a risk assessment of the training environment where the training will be conducted, whether that be in a workplace or a simulated environment. If you're in a workplace, you need to be aware of those policies and procedures used within that workplace to make the participants of your training or the candidates of your assessment aware of those things. You also need to make sure that in a training environment that you go and do an inspection, so that you're aware of the hazards involved, and then you can go through a risk management process, having identified the hazards, doing the risk assessment or assessing the risk, and then putting in controls prior to the start of your training and your participants coming to the venue or in that workplace. The things you need to consider that I spoke about earlier in relation to those risk assessments are all those things in relation to the setup of the room, making sure that there's clear ventilation, make sure that the lighting is effective, make sure that there are no trip hazards into cords that may be impending through the passageways. Again, you may need to put in controls where you're running computer equipment or electrical equipment to manage the safety of the cord, so there's no trip hazards for your participants. It is making sure that if you have participants with special needs, in the case of being disabled, that they have access in and out of the venue, access so that they can sit at the front of a room, for example, and making sure that those requirements are addressed prior to the commencement of the training. And there are any number of factors that you need to consider in relation to the safety of yourself and the training environment and the participants that will be in that environment. Once you've done your risk assessment and all the details prior to the commencement of the training, at the start of the training, you need to again go around, just do a quick preliminary check. But at the start of the training, in your introduction, you need to make sure that you inform your participants of all the details in relation to the evacuation procedures. the details on the toilets that may be inconveniences for their during their time in the training session.